The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at the worst possible time. Ambassador Shunwei stood at the viewing port of the massive space station orbiting Kepler 442b, watching the distant flashes of weapons fire illuminate the darkness between the stars. The Vakari fleet had broken through 3 defensive lines in the past week, and panic was spreading through the civilized systems like wildfire. Behind him, the representatives of 47 species argued in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and translated voices. The humans had only been members of the council for 8 years, making them the newest and least trusted voice in the chamber. Jin had grown used to the sidelong glances and dismissive gestures that greeted any human proposal. "The Terran representative will speak," announced Councillor Vexhai, the Altarian who served as current session leader. Her crystalline form shifted colors from blue to amber, indicating reluctant acknowledgement of Chun's request for the floor. Chun stepped forward, his boots clicking against the polished metal deck. Around the circular chamber, dozens of alien eyes turned toward him. The Zephyrians floated in their environmental suits, their tentacles writhing with what Chun had learned indicated skepticism. The massive Corvan delegates sat motionless, their rock-like exteriors giving no hint of their thoughts. The insectoid Thexali chittered quietly among themselves, their compound eyes glittering in the chamber's artificial light. "Honored counselors," Chun began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation network. "The Vakari advance cannot be stopped by conventional fleet actions. We've seen this in the battles at Rigel 7 and the Centauri Nexus. Their ships are too fast. Their technology too advanced for direct confrontation." A dismissive trill came from the Melodian representative. "And what does the infant species propose? Your kind has barely learned to travel between stars. The Vakari have been a threat since before your ancestors discovered fire." Chun didn't allow the insult to show on his face. "We propose asymmetric warfare. Small unit tactics. Precision strikes against their command structure and supply lines." The chamber erupted in a mixture of sounds that the translation system rendered as laughter, scorn, and disbelief. Councillor Thexali Ix clicked rapidly, the translation coming through as "humans and their primitive notions of combat. You think the Vakari fear your crude projectile weapons and chemical explosives? The Vakari have adapted to our technologies," added Councillor Granite that endures of the Corvan. "Their personal shields deflect energy weapons. Their armor resists kinetic strikes. They hunt in packs, using superior numbers and coordination. What could humans possibly offer that we have not already tried?" Chun reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device. It looked unremarkable, a simple cylinder of dark metal, barely larger than his thumb. "This is a Mark 7 neural disruptor, human-designed. It bypasses energy shields and penetrates even Vakari bio-armor. One shot, properly placed, can disable their neural command clusters." "Impressive," conceded Vexhai, her crystalline form shifting to a cautious green. "But the Vakari do not expose themselves carelessly. They fight from concealment, striking from the shadows. Their night vision is superior to most species. In darkness, they become nearly unstoppable predators." "That's exactly the problem," Chun said quietly. "You're all thinking like prey." The silence that followed was profound. Chun could feel the shift in the room's atmosphere, the sudden tension that came when a fundamental assumption was challenged. Councillor Melodia sang a sharp, discordant note. "Explain yourself, human." "Every species in this council evolved as either herbivores or omnivores with herbivore tendencies," Chun continued. "You think in terms of hiding from predators, of defensive formations, of retreat when faced with superior hunters. But humans," he paused, letting his words sink in. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We're the species that ran mammoths to death across continents. We're the ones who developed pack tactics to bring down creatures 10 times our size. Primitive." "Accomplishments," scoffed Exali. "Ix, what relevance do your ancient hunting techniques have against advanced alien technology?" Chin smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "The Vakari think they're apex predators because they can see in the dark. But darkness isn't their ally, it's ours. We don't fear the dark. We've made the dark fear us. The Altarian counselor's crystalline structure flickered between colors rapidly, indicating confusion and growing concern. What do you mean? Human snipers have been operating in the contested zones for the past 6 months, Chun revealed. Not officially, of course. Volunteer units operating without council authorization. The Vakari High Command has been trying to figure out why their field commanders keep disappearing. The chamber erupted again, this time in alarm rather than scorn. Multiple counselors spoke at once, their voices blending into an incomprehensible din until Vexhai restored order with a piercing harmonic pulse. You admit to unauthorized military action? Granite that endures rumbled, the massive Corvin rising partially from his seat. This is a violation of the non-interference protocols. Technically, yes, Chun acknowledged. But the results speak for themselves. The Vakari advance has slowed considerably in sectors where human operators are active. Their command structure is becoming increasingly paranoid and fractured. Counselor Melodia's song took on a questioning tone. How is this possible? The Vakari are superior in every measurable way. Their technology, their physical capabilities, their tactical knowledge. They're superior at direct confrontation, Chun agreed. But they've never faced an opponent that refuses to confront them directly. Human snipers don't engage in firefights. They strike from concealment, eliminate high-value targets, and disappear before retaliation is possible. The Vakari don't know how to fight an enemy they can't see coming. But their night vision, protested the Zephyrian representative, tentacles writhing with agitation. Their enhanced senses. How do your snipers avoid detection? Chun's smile grew wider. Who said anything about avoiding detection? The best human snipers don't hide from their prey. They become part of the environment itself. They use the Vakari's superior senses against them. The translation system struggled with the collective gasp that went through the chamber. Several species had no equivalent expression for the sound they were trying to make. Impossible, clicked Lixali Ix. No organic being can evade Vakari sensory arrays. Their perception extends across multiple spectrums. You're right, Chun said. They can detect us. But detection doesn't equal identification or threat assessment. Human snipers have learned to mimic the electromagnetic signatures of local wildlife, to mask their thermal patterns using environmental camouflage, to move in ways that trigger the Vakari's pattern recognition as non-threatening. He activated his personal display, projecting a 3-dimensional battlefield map into the center of the chamber. Red dots indicated Vakari positions, while blue dots showed the locations of various council forces. Scattered throughout were small green markers. These are confirmed human sniper positions from the Battle of Kepler Station 3 weeks ago, Chun explained. Note the proximity to Vakari command posts. Our people were often within 50 meters of high-value targets for hours before taking their shots. Counselor Vexhia's crystalline form had gone completely transparent with shock. This cannot be accurate. The Vakari would have detected such close-range infiltration. They did detect them, Chun said matter-of-factly. The tactical logs show multiple sensor contacts. But the Vakari classified them as local fauna, nothing threatening enough to warrant investigation or elimination. By the time they realized their mistake, 17 command officers were dead and their entire fleet coordination had collapsed. The silence stretched for long moments as the implications sank in. Finally, Granite That Endures spoke in a voice like grinding stone. You speak of your species as if they were monsters. Creatures that hunt sentient beings for sport. Not for sport, Chun corrected quietly. For survival. The difference is crucial. Monsters kill because they enjoy it. Predators kill because it's necessary. And which are humans? Asked Counselor Melodia, her song now barely above a whisper. Chun looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had dismissed his species as primitive newcomers. We're whatever we need to be to protect what we care about. Right now, that means being the nightmare that keeps Vakari commanders awake during their rest cycles. The chamber's lighting dimmed automatically as the station entered its night cycle. In the reduced illumination, Shun's human features took on a different quality. His eyes, adapted for binocular vision and depth perception, seemed to track movement that the other species couldn't detect. His posture, balanced and ready for instant motion, suddenly appeared less diplomatic and more predatory. "The Council has a choice," Shun continued, his voice carrying clearly through the darkness that seemed to unsettle many of the delegates. "You can continue fighting the Vakari, using conventional tactics and watch them systematically destroy every defensive position you establish. Or you can authorize human special operations teams to do what they do best." "And what is that?" Vexhai asked, her crystalline form now pulsing with nervous yellow light. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had been motionless for 73 hours. Her ghillie suit, a masterpiece of human camouflage technology, incorporated adaptive fibers that mimicked the electromagnetic signature of the surrounding debris field. To Vakari sensors, she appeared to be nothing more than another piece of twisted metal floating in the wreckage of what had once been the mining Station Prosperity 7. Through her scope, she watched the Vakari command ship Doom's Herald maintain its position 3 kilometers away. The massive vessel, easily the size of a human city, bristled with weapons and sensor arrays. Its biometallic hull shifted and flowed like living tissue, adapting continuously to optimize its defensive capabilities. For 3 days, Elena had tracked the movement patterns of the ship's crew. The Vakari were methodical creatures, following strict protocols even in what they considered secure space. Every 6 hours, the ship's commander would emerge onto the primary observation deck to conduct a personal review of their operational area. It was a ritual born of centuries of military tradition, and like all rituals, it had become predictable. Elena's rifle was a work of art, a human-designed weapon that existed at the cutting edge of multiple technologies. The barrel was forged from metamaterials that could adjust their molecular structure to optimize projectile velocity. The scope incorporated quantum sensors that could track targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Most importantly, the ammunition was designed specifically for Vakari physiology. Each bullet contained a core of weaponized nanites, programmed to disrupt the bioelectric pathways that Vakari used for everything from movement to thought. A single hit anywhere on their body would cascade into complete neural shutdown within seconds. The Vakari's advanced regeneration abilities, which made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons, were useless against an attack that targeted their fundamental biology. The target appeared exactly on schedule. Commander Thexgorth emerged onto the observation deck, his massive form silhouetted against the ship's internal lighting. At over 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating that could deflect most known weapons, he represented everything that made the Vakari a dominant force in the galaxy. Elena adjusted her breathing, slowing her heart rate to the bare minimum needed to maintain consciousness. This was the moment that separated human snipers from every other military force in known space. The ability to achieve a state of absolute stillness while remaining instantly ready for action. The crosshairs settled on the junction between Thexgorth's helmet and shoulder guard, a gap only millimeters wide, but more than sufficient for a marksman of Elena's caliber. Her finger applied pressure to the trigger with mechanical precision. The result of decades of training and combat experience, the rifle's discharge was nearly silent, its advanced suppression systems dispersing the energy across multiple frequencies to avoid detection. The projectile crossed 3 kilometers of space in 1.3 seconds, arriving at its target before any defensive system could react. Thexgorth collapsed instantly, his massive body crashing to the deck with enough force to be felt throughout the ship. Elena was already moving before his form had stopped twitching, her camouflage system adapting to new positions as she began her extraction sequence. The reaction aboard the Vakari ship was immediate and violent. Emergency lights flooded the observation deck as medical teams rushed to their commander's aid. But Elena knew, as did every human sniper operating in the field, that there would be no aid effective enough. The nanits were already spreading through Thexgorth's nervous system, systematically shutting down every function necessary for life. What the Vakari didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was that Elena was not alone. Positioned throughout the debris field, 7 other human snipers waited with infinite patience for their own targets to present themselves. The death of one Vakari commander would trigger a predictable response pattern that would expose other, high-value targets to elimination. Captain Marcus Chun, no relation to the ambassador, occupied a position inside the hulk of a destroyed transport ship 2 kilometers from Elena's location. His target was the secondary command officer who would inevitably emerge to assume control of the fleet. Through his scope, Marcus watched the frantic activity aboard the command vessel as news of their leader's assassination spread through the crew. The Vakari response was exactly what human intelligence had predicted. Within minutes, Sub-Commander Velkoth appeared on the ship's secondary bridge, his form clearly visible through the transparent aluminum viewports. Marcus had been tracking this particular officer for weeks, studying his habits and psychological profile until he could predict his movements with mathematical precision. Velkoth was younger than his predecessor, more aggressive and less cautious. He would want to demonstrate his capability as a leader by taking immediate action against whatever had killed his commander. This predictability was a weakness that human strategists had learned to exploit with devastating effectiveness. The second shot came 12 minutes after the first. Velkoth was in the middle of issuing orders to launch a full sensor sweep of the area when Marcus's bullet found its target. The Vakari officer's head simply disappeared, replaced by a cloud of biomatter that painted the bridge's interior in vivid colors. The psychological impact was immediate. The remaining Vakari crew could see that their enemies possessed capabilities beyond their understanding. Someone was killing their leaders with impossible precision from distances that should have made such shots impossible. More terrifying, whoever was responsible remained completely invisible to their advanced sensor. Erased. Lieutenant Sarah Kim held her position inside a piece of mining equipment that had been drifting through the debris field for months. Her target was the ship's chief navigator, an individual whose death would effectively strand the entire fleet in this system until replacement personnel could be brought in from Vakari space. The delay would give Council forces time to establish defensive positions and bring up reinforcements. The third kill came 38 minutes after the first, just as the Vakari were beginning to implement emergency protocols. The navigator had been attempting to coordinate with other ships in the fleet when Sarah's bullet found him. The shot traveled 4.2 kilometers through space, threading between pieces of debris with margins measured in centimeters, to strike its target precisely between the segments of his natural armor. By the time the 4th Vakari officer died, panic was beginning to set in aboard the remaining ships. Their crews could see the pattern. Someone or something was systematically eliminating their command structure with methodical precision. Every precaution they took, every defensive measure they implemented, seemed to make no difference. Commander Korthex of the battleship Endless Hunger authorized full active sensor sweeps of the surrounding area. Powerful beams swept through space, analyzing every piece of debris larger than a fist. The results showed exactly what they expected: twisted metal, crystallized atmosphere, and the normal detritus of a space battle. Nothing that could possibly threaten a heavily armored Vakari warship. What Korthex couldn't know was that the human snipers had prepared for this contingency. Their equipment incorporated stealth technologies that went far beyond simple electromagnetic dampening. They had studied Vakari sensor technology for months, learning to mimic the exact signatures that the alien equipment would classify as harmless debris. Specialist David Park had spent the last year perfecting his ability to remain motionless for extended periods. His current position, welded inside what appeared to be a damaged cargo container, would have been impossible for most species to tolerate. The cramped space allowed almost no movement. The temperature fluctuated wildly as the container rotated through space, and there was barely enough oxygen to sustain consciousness. But David was patient in the way that only humans understood patience. He had volunteered for this mission knowing that he might spend weeks in this position waiting for the perfect opportunity. When that opportunity came, he would have perhaps seconds to take a shot that could alter the course of the war. The fifth target was the fleet's intelligence coordinator, a Vakari female responsible for analyzing human tactical patterns. Her death would blind their remaining forces to the possibility of future attacks. David watched through his scope as she moved through the ship's information center, occasionally pausing at workstations to review data or issue instructions. Her mistake was stopping at a viewing port to observe the debris field, where her comrades had died. For 30 seconds, she stood silhouetted against the ship's internal lighting, trying to spot whatever threat had eliminated 5 of their most experienced officers. David's shot was perfect. The bullet entered through the viewport at an angle that bypassed both the transparent aluminum and the Vakari's natural armor, striking her precisely at the base of her skull. She collapsed without ever seeing what had killed her. The remaining Vakari commanders were now faced with a nightmare scenario that challenged everything they believed about warfare. An invisible enemy was systematically destroying their leadership using weapons and tactics they couldn't understand. Every defensive measure they implemented seemed to be anticipated and countered. Fleet Ad. The War Council of Vakari Prime had not convened an emergency session for over 3 centuries. The massive chamber, carved from the living stone of their homeworld's primary mountain, echoed with the clicking and hissing of their most senior military commanders. Bioluminescent organisms embedded in the walls pulsed with agitated patterns of red and orange, reflecting the emotional state of the assembled leadership. Supreme War Leader Kenthaver stood at the center of the circular chamber, his massive form trembling with barely controlled rage. The reports spread before him painted a picture that challenged everything the Vakari believed about their place in the galaxy. In the past 6 months, they had lost 47 fleet commanders, 236 ship captains, and over 1,000 specialized officers to an enemy they had never directly engaged. How? His voice resonated through the chamber like grinding stone. How does a species that learned interstellar travel 8 years ago systematically destroy our most experienced commanders? Battle Leader Vexthal, one of the few senior officers to survive contact with human forces, clicked nervously before responding. They do not fight as we understand fighting, Supreme Leader. They refuse direct engagement. They strike from concealment and disappear before retaliation is possible. Cowards, snarled another commander. They lack the honor to face us in honest battle. Vexthal's bioluminescent patches flashed warning colors. Not cowards, War Leader Nethgrim. Something far more dangerous. They fight like we are prey to be hunted rather than enemies to be defeated. The silence that followed was profound. The concept was so alien to Vakari thinking that many of the assembled commanders struggled to process it. For their entire evolutionary history, the Vakari had been apex predators. They understood being feared, not being hunted. Intelligence reports indicate they call themselves apex predators, Vexthal continued. Their entire species evolved as hunters. They have capabilities we never considered because our own evolution never required them. Supreme War Leader Kenthaver activated the chamber's holographic display system. 3-dimensional images filled the space, showing tactical analyses of recent human operations. The data was both fascinating and terrifying. They can remain motionless for periods we initially thought impossible, he explained to the assembled commanders. Some of their snipers have maintained the same position for over a month. Their patience exceeds our understanding. They think in terms of time scales that would drive most species insane. The display showed sensor records from the Battle of Kepler Station. Red dots indicated known Vakari positions, while blue showed Council forces. Scattered throughout were green markers that had only been identified after extensive analysis. These are confirmed human sniper positions, Kenthaver continued. Note the proximity to our command posts. This human was within 20 meters of our tactical center for 18 days before taking his shot. Our sensors detected him repeatedly, but classified him as harmless debris. War Leader Nethgrim studied the display with growing unease. How is such deception possible? Our sensory arrays are the most advanced in known space. Because they understand our technology better than we understand theirs, Vexthel replied grimly. They have analyzed our sensor patterns, learned to mimic the signatures we ignore, adapted their equipment to exploit our assumptions. They turn our own superiority against us. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every advantage the Vakari had possessed, their advanced sensors, their superior night vision, their enhanced reflexes, had been turned into weaknesses by an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. What of direct assault? Demanded another commander. Send overwhelming force against their positions. Crush them with superior numbers. Kenthaver's expression darkened. You assume we can find their positions. Fleet Admiral Gorthvold deployed 12,000 troops to sweep the debris field where our commanders were killed. They found nothing. No equipment, no bodies, no evidence that humans had ever been present. He activated another section of the display, showing the results of the massive search operation. Every piece of debris larger than a human fist had been examined. Every potential hiding spot had been investigated. The search had been the most thorough in Vakari military history, and it had revealed absolutely nothing. They are not simply hidden, Kenthaver explained. They have become part of the environment itself. Our troops swept through areas where we know human snipers were positioned, sometimes passing within meters of their locations, and detected nothing threatening. The chamber fell silent again as the assembled commanders contemplated fighting an enemy that could achieve perfect invisibility while maintaining the ability to strike with lethal precision. It was a tactical nightmare that challenged their fundamental understanding of warfare. War. Leader Thexmal spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. What do our scientists say about human capabilities? Are there technological solutions? The research cast has analyzed captured human equipment, Kenthaver replied. Their technology is not significantly more advanced than ours. Their weapons are actually less powerful than our own in direct comparison. But their application of that technology is unprecedented. The display changed to show detailed analysis of human sniper rifles and camouflage systems. To Vakari eyes, the equipment appeared crude and primitive, but the data revealed capabilities that bordered on the impossible. Their rifles can adjust their molecular structure during firing to optimize projectile characteristics, Kenthaver explained. Their camouflage systems incorporate living components that actively adapt to local conditions. Most significantly, their ammunition is specifically designed to exploit our biological weaknesses. This last point caused visible agitation throughout the chamber. The idea that another species had studied Vakari physiology closely enough to design targeted weapons was profoundly disturbing. They know us, Vexthel added quietly. Better than we know them? Every human weapon, every tactic, every strategy is designed around detailed knowledge of how we think and fight. They have been preparing for this war since before we knew they existed. Supreme War Leader Kenthaver deactivated the display and faced his assembled commanders directly. The situation is worse than any of you realize. Our intelligence sources within the Galactic Council report that the human operations we have witnessed represent only a small fraction of their capabilities. The bioluminescent walls pulsed with alarmed yellow patterns as the implications sank in, the snipers operating. Against us are volunteers, Kenthaver continued. Elite specialists, but not regular military units. The humans have now authorized full-scale operations. Professional military forces with advanced equipment and complete intelligence support. War Leader Nethgrim's voice carried a note of panic that would have been unthinkable months earlier. How many? What are we facing? Conservative estimates suggest they can field over 50,000 specialized operators, Kenthaver replied, each with capabilities equivalent to our most elite hunters, all trained specifically for operations against Vakari forces. The number was staggering. 50,000 soldiers who could operate with the invisibility and patience that had already devastated their command structure. The mathematics of attrition were inescapable. The Vakari military leadership would be extinct within a year. There is more, Kenthiver added, his voice dropping to barely audible levels. Intelligence suggests the humans are not content with defensive operations. They are planning something they call deep hunting, systematic elimination of our command structure throughout Vakari space. The chamber erupted in sounds of alarm and disbelief. The idea that humans would dare to operate within Vakari territory itself seemed impossible, but recent events had shattered many assumptions about what humans could accomplish. Recommendations? Kenthiver demanded that the silence stretched for long moments before Vexthal spoke hesitantly. Withdrawal from contested systems. Consolidation of forces around our primary worlds. Development of new detection technologies and tactical doctrines. You counsel retreat? Nethgrim snarled. Surrender to a species barely capable of interstellar flight. I counsel survival, Vexthal replied firmly. We are facing opponents who have mastered forms of warfare we never imagined. Our current tactical doctrine is not merely inadequate, it is actively harmful to our survival. Other commanders began voicing their opinions, the chamber filling with a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and bioluminescent flashes. Some called for immediate negotiation with the humans. Others demanded massive military mobilization. A few suggested seeking alliance with other species to counter the human threat. But deep in the fortress cities of Vakari Prime, another conversation was taking place. Senior researcher Kithanel stood before the High Command Science Council, presenting findings that would reshape their understanding of the war. The fundamental problem, she explained to the assembled scientists, is that we approached this conflict assuming the humans would fight like us. We expected them to value the same things we value, to think in the same patterns we think. The holographic display showed comparative biological and psychological analyses of multiple species, including detailed studies of human evolution and behavior. But humans are different.